Nobody in Velthar had ever heard Caden Ashvale say the word sorry. Not once in his 34 years. Not when he sent rival wolves into exile. Not when he closed borders and left packs scrambling. Not even when the decisions hurt him too. He was the Alpha King, and Alpha Kings did not apologize. They decided, they acted, and the rest of Velthar adjusted. He had ruled the Iron Fang pack since he was 22, younger than any king before him, and in 12 years he had turned a fragile, fractured territory into something that actually held together. 7 packs, each with their own alpha, their own grudges, their own history written in blood. Caden had not made them love each other. He had simply made it too costly for them to fight. That was enough. That had always been enough. He was riding toward the Deadwood Pass on a gray winter morning when one of his trackers pulled up beside him and said quietly, "She's here. We found her." Caden did not need to ask who she was. Mira Kaelwyn, 28 years old. Former spy for the Silver Crescent Pack. 3 years ago, she had passed classified Iron Fang intelligence to 3 enemy packs, disappeared the night before her arrest, and made him look like a fool in front of every alpha in Velthar. Her name had been sitting on his desk like an open wound ever since. He told the tracker to stay back and rode in alone. The border post was barely standing. The roof had half collapsed under years of snow and neglect, and the walls were black with cold. Caden pushed the door open and stopped. Mira was in the corner. She was thinner than he remembered, and she had a wound along her left side that had been wrapped in torn cloth and ignored for what looked like several days. Her hair was loose and tangled. She looked like someone who had been running for a very long time and had finally run out of places to go. She was holding a child, a little girl, maybe 2 years old, bundled inside Mira's coat with only her face showing. The child was not moving. Her small cheeks were flushed deep red, and her breathing was shallow and fast. Mira looked up when he entered. She did not beg. She did not try to run. She looked at him the way a person looks at something inevitable, and said very quietly, "Help her first, then do whatever you need to do to me." Caden stood in the doorway for 3 full seconds. Every protocol he had ever written said to arrest her immediately. Every instinct he had spent 12 years building said the same thing. He turned around and called the healer. He did not examine that decision too closely. He told himself it was practical. A prisoner who died before questioning was useless. He told himself it had nothing to do with the way Mira had not moved an inch from the child, not even when he walked in, not even now. He told himself a lot of things on the long ride back to the Iron Fang stronghold. The healer worked through the night. The little girl had a deep chest fever, the kind that could go either way before dawn. Mira sat in a chair across the room with iron restraints on her wrists and watched every breath the child took. Caden sat near the doorway and watched Mira. She did not sleep. She did not ask for water. She did not ask him anything at all. She simply watched her daughter with the focused, still attention of someone who had decided that watching was the only thing standing between the child and the worst outcome. The healer came out near sunrise and said the girl would be fine. She just needed warmth and rest. Mira closed her eyes. Her whole body seemed to drop about 2 inches in the chair. She breathed out slowly through her nose. Then she opened her eyes and looked directly at Caden and said, "Thank you." He did not respond. He got up and left the room. He spent the next 2 hours staring out a window. Something was wrong with the picture he had carried in his head for 3 years. The Mira Kaelwyn in his intelligence files was cold, calculating, motivated by money and loyalty to a rival pack. The woman in that chair was neither of those things. People who were cold and calculating did not take off their own coats in a blizzard to wrap around a sick child. They did not sit in restraints all night without complaint, watching a small chest rise and fall. He went back in and interrogated her properly. She answered every question without hesitation. She did not perform innocence. She did not cry. She spoke in the same quiet, direct voice, and she told him everything. She had not sold Iron Fang intelligence for money. Someone had taken Lena, her daughter, when Lena was barely 6 months old, and told Mira they would kill the baby if she did not cooperate. The intelligence she passed had been deliberately swapped before delivery. She had handed the enemy packs mislabeled decoys, useless information dressed up to look real. She had bought herself time. The person who organized all of it, she said, was someone Caden trusted completely. She said a name. Kaidan did not move for a long time. Voss Greyhollow, 61 years old, head strategist of the Iron Fang Pack, the man who had mentored Kaidan from the age of 12, who had stood at his side at every summit, who had helped him build everything he had built. Voss, who was currently sitting in the council room 2 floors below them, probably drinking his morning tea. Mira watched him process it. She did not rush him. She gave him the time he needed, and then she said, "I know how it sounds. I know you have no reason to believe me, but I have evidence. It took me 3 years to collect it. I was waiting until I had enough." He believed her. He did not know precisely why. He simply did. He did not announce her capture. He put Mira and Lena in a secured wing of the stronghold and told his staff nothing. Then he spent 3 weeks quietly pulling every thread she had given him. He verified dates. He tracked old records. He followed money across pack accounts that should not have been connected. Everything matched. Voss had been running a private intelligence operation for 15 years. He had been manufacturing conflict between the packs of Velthar, feeding each one carefully shaped lies about the others, keeping everyone destabilized and dependent on Iron Fang arbitration. Every war, every border dispute, every summit crisis that Kaidan had stepped in to resolve, most of it had been engineered. Voss created the fires and then handed Kaidan the water, and Kaidan had spent 12 years being grateful for the bucket. The betrayal was so complete and so old that Kaidan had to sit with it for 2 full days before he could think clearly again. During those weeks, he found himself returning to the secured wing more often than he needed to. The interrogation was long since finished. There was no professional reason to keep sitting across a small wooden table from Mira Kaelwyn while she walked him through document after document she had memorized over 3 years of running. But she was the only person in the stronghold who knew what he knew, and there was something about talking to someone who understood the full shape of the thing, who did not need the context explained, who would look at him directly and say what she actually thought, rather than what he wanted to hear. She asked him once, late at night, why he had helped Lena first. She said she had expected him to secure her and let the child take her chances. He said he did not know. She looked at him for a moment. Then she said, "That's probably the most honest thing anyone has told me in 3 years." Lena, for her part, had decided that Kaidan was not frightening. She was 2 years old, and she had her mother's directness and none of her mother's caution. She had taken to leaving small items outside his study door: a smooth gray pebble, 2 acorns, a piece of bark that was shaped, loosely, like a wolf if you were generous. He kept every one of them on the corner of his desk. He did not examine that either. The situation came apart in the 4th week. Voss discovered that Kaidan had been investigating and moved quickly. He leaked a fabricated report to all 6 rival pack alphas, claiming that Kaidan was secretly planning a full annexation of their territories and had been using the peace summits to gather information against them. Within 48 hours, 6 packs were mobilizing. Velthar was closer to total war than it had been in a generation. Kaidan had one move. He sent personal riders to all 6 alphas and called an emergency summit on neutral ground. He gave them no reason and no details. He simply told them to come. He told Mira he needed her to come with him. She looked at him steadily and said, "You know what they'll do when they see me?" He said, "Yes, come anyway." She came. The summit hall was cold and tense. 6 alphas and their senior advisors, all of them angry, all of them armed with the story Voss had planted. Several of them looked at Mira when she walked in and reached for weapons before their advisors caught their arms. Kaidan stood at the front of the room and spoke first. He did something that no Alpha King in Velthar's history had ever done in front of a gathered council of rivals. He laid out, in full, the evidence of his own pack's corruption. He named what Voss had done. He named the conflicts that had been manufactured. He named the dead who had died in wars that were built from lies. And he told them that he had been blind to it for 12 years, and that the blindness was his failure. The room was very quiet. Then Mira stood and spoke. She walked the 6 alphas through each fabricated conflict, one by one, with dates and documents and names. She told them what information had been sent to whom, and when, and what the real facts had been. Several of the alphas began to understand, partway through her account, that battles they had fought and losses they still mourned had been triggered deliberately by a man they had never met, for a purpose that had nothing to do with them. One alpha, a woman named Sarah of the Ashwater Pack, lost her composure briefly. She had lost a younger brother in a border conflict 4 years ago. She stood up from her chair and then sat back down and put her hand over her eyes, and breathed. Nobody spoke for a long time when Mira finished. The eldest alpha in the room was Ren of the Stormbreak Pack, 72 years old, who had ruled longer than anyone present. He had sat through the entire account without expression. When the silence had held long enough, he said, "The woman who carried this evidence for 3 years, alone, while running with a child, and then walked into a room full of people who have cause to distrust her to tell it. That woman deserves more than our suspicion." Nobody argued with him. Voss was brought before the Unified Council the following morning. Kaidan had made a decision about what would happen to him, and it had not been an easy one. Several of the alphas wanted execution. It would have been simpler. It would have felt cleaner. Kaidan argued against it. He said that executing Voss buried the evidence with him and handed him the easiest possible ending. Instead, Voss was stripped of every rank and title, formally exiled from all 7 Pack territories, and his entire 15-year archive of fabricated intelligence was made public record, available to every Pack, every family, every person in Velthar who had a reason to know what had really happened to someone they loved. It was the hardest order Kaidan had ever signed. Voss had raised him. He signed it anyway. 3 days after the summit, the 6 alphas sent him a formal and unanimous proposal. They wanted to restructure the governance of Velthar, not one dominant pack holding the others in check. A unified council, 7 packs with equal standing, and a neutral arbiter with binding authority over disputes. Their unanimous nomination for the arbiter, Mira Kaelwyn. Not because she was powerful, not because she had connections or titles, because she had held the truth for 3 years, under conditions that would have broken most people, and she had used it not for revenge or survival or personal gain, but to stop something that was hurting everyone. That was the only quality the 6 alphas agreed mattered. Kaidan delivered the proposal to her himself. He sat across from her in the small room that had become, over 4 weeks, a place where they said actual things to each other, and he put the document on the table. She read it. Then she looked at him and asked what Lena would have from all of this. He thought about what to say. Then he said, she would have a Velthar that was built on something real for the first time in a generation. And he said, more quietly, that she would have someone who would spend however long necessary, making sure that was true. He was not only talking about the territory. Mira understood both things he was saying. She looked at the document for another moment, then she signed it. The crowning was held in the summit hall, neutral ground, which felt appropriate. All 7 Pack alphas stood in the same room, under the same banner for the first time in the territory's recorded history. It was not a comfortable gathering. There were 400 years of difficult history in that room, and everyone in it knew it, but they stayed. Lena sat beside Kaidan during the ceremony. She was wearing shoes that were slightly too big, and she had been given a piece of soft bread to keep her occupied, which she held very seriously. She watched her mother receive a crown she had not asked for, and had earned anyway. At some point during the formal portion of the proceedings, Lena decided she was done sitting quietly. She reached over and took Kaidan's hand in both of hers and held it. He let her. Nobody in the room said anything about it. But every person in that room noticed, and every person in that room understood that what they were witnessing was not just a political ceremony. It was something quieter and more durable than politics. It was 2 people, and a small girl in oversized shoes, deciding that after everything, this was where they were. The months that followed were not simple or easy. Rebuilding trust between 7 packs that had been deliberately set against each other for 15 years was slow, uncomfortable, ongoing work. There were arguments. There were old grievances that surfaced at the worst times. There were nights when it seemed impossible. Mira was not a comfortable arbiter. She asked hard questions. She refused to let easy agreements substitute for actual resolution. She had a stubborn habit of siding with whoever had less power in a dispute, regardless of which alpha she was inconveniencing. The council found her exhausting and indispensable in equal measure. Kaidan and Mira built something together, the way lasting things are usually built, slowly, with difficulty, with honesty, without any of the performances that people put on when they are trying to seem like something they are not. He was still the most controlled person in any room. She still asked him questions that stopped him completely and made him reconsider things he had been certain about. Lena grew up speaking Tupac dialects, and with a calm, natural talent for reading people that she had clearly inherited, and that Caden suspected would be formidable by the time she was 12. On a morning 2 years after the summit, Caden found another small object on the corner of his desk. It was a flat gray stone with a rough shape scratched into it. It looked, he realized after a moment, like a crown. He set it next to the others. He had never apologized easily. He still did not, but there were other languages for the things that mattered, and over time, he had learned to speak some of them. Velthar did not become a perfect place. No place does. But it became a place built on something true, tended by a woman who had every reason to give up and didn't, and watched over by a man who had been certain about almost everything and had needed to be wrong. That was enough. That was, in the end, more than enough.